I'm Laura Vinroot Poole, and this is What We Wore. Ellen Carey has been a part of the fashion industry for over 30 years. She's created a career out of supporting emerging designers and encourages everyone to find their own unique path within the industry. Remind me, I know you're Canadian. Tell me where you're from.
I'm from a small town outside of the border of upstate New York. My father and mother met in church, believe it or not. And
I believe it.
He was a altar boy and she got communion. I guess it was love after that. And she was younger and from the Canadian side and probably not the posh family his mother wanted her handsome son to marry. She was very petite. And so we have dual citizenship because of my mother's Canadian side. My father was the handsome young son of the big family and was to marry, some, let's say, Grace Kelly's woman and not my mother, a little French Canadian. So he inherited the family farms when his father passed, and they had to run dairy farms and make cheese and ice cream. And it was a huge operation that my mother became the controller of the accounts and the finances and the public image, dealing with, and she always dressed very elegantly, Laura, even though she was on a farm, and as did my father when he went into public. So I think early on, she made me realize that an outfit that you wear into the public's eye can create an aura. And she was, again, very tiny. So she altered everything and learned how to sew. She loved a good jumpsuit because of her. I remember these jumpsuits she would make with her headbands. And she was very outgoing and attractive and often went places alone because my father was more a reserved man that didn't really like to go to the theater or social events like she did. So she dragged me along. And that's how I started dressing up in whatever little dress or glove or pocketbook she'd add, the more, the better for me. My sister didn't get that gene. She was the tomboy and older. And often my mom wanted to dress us alike. And this did not go well with my sister. So if you see me crying in early baby pictures, it's because she beat me up because I wanted those gloves.
And you also had a very fashionable aunt.
I did, Aunt Cora. She was she ended her life in Florida, but she lived in New York, and it was way back in the 40s, and she would eat a biscuit. She would tell us, because she just to stay thin before she went somewhere, because she didn't want to seem like she was overeating. It was very polite to be very narrow. And they had their hats and their fur coats and their finery, every picture that I got to go through in the picture books. But when they'd come up to visit us at Christmas or a big holiday in the summer, they would bring gifts. And my favorite one she gifted me was a jewelry box where you open up and the music plays and the little ballerina dances. And that's a gift that, every time she came, it was going to be something I didn't know, I didn't have. I'd sit at her feet. I'd open the gift. And yes, I do say I'd take after her a little bit. I'm definitely nervous and I'm definitely like my accessories like she did.
And Ellen, did you go visit Aunt Cora when she lived in Manhattan?
She was on Jane Street, believe it or not, in the West Village. I didn't, I was very young. But my mom would with her sisters. My mom had two sisters, Joan and Judy. But that is my love of the West Village. Definitely. Jane Street back then was as beautiful as it is today.
Wow. And so growing up, you were in upstate New York or Canada, upstate New York?
It was both. And I went to school in Plattsburgh and McGill University. I took a semester in Syracuse at a clothing store to work in fashion. And it wasn't what I was schooling. I was schooling in economics and journalism. My college roommate was from Scarsdale, and she was a veterinarian. And we became very good friends. And that's how I came to New York. I came with her I remember one holiday and we stayed in New York for, 3 weeks, and I just got the bug of being in a big city versus the country. But we did have the farm. I had very serious commitments. A lot of it was the packaging of things, stamping the expiration. I was part of the line that had to do all of this. And it was like making lipstick in a factory. You had your little day, job. Mine was at the end.
And what was your impression of that? I mean, was that something that you like? Did you have any indication of what you wanted to do when you grew up?
We had the magazines. I remember idolizing those. It was the films. My mom loved the movies. I mean, the glamorous movies. We'd watch it. There was that one where Judy Carr gets hit, and she's supposed to meet at the Empire State Building. I forget the name of the movie. That was one of my mom's favorite movies. We'd watch it. So there was always that fantasy. Remember, it was Gene Kelly and Elizabeth Taylor. My mom maybe looked more like Elizabeth Taylor. I was very odd in my coloring. I had red hair and blue eyes. My family's all black hair and black eyes. So no one quite understood where I came from. And I didn't tan. They were out in those hay fields, tanned. My sister was lounging in bikinis, tan. Oh, I was a lobster, hiding under an umbrella. So it didn't quite work, but we had an aunt who lived in New York, and that's how I came to be here. But I went to, I got picked from college, and I moved in a boarding house on Gramercy Park, and that's where I started. And that's how I met a lady walking her dog in Gramercy Park, and left my financial career, which I had gotten to New York from college. And I ended up moving secretly to the magazine to work for her. And that was the start of my change of career and a path into fashion.
Wait, okay. So you left McGill at what, 21 and moved to New York?
1980s were the college years to 84. And then I came here to work on Wall Street. Actually, really, truly Wall Street, down here where I live
Of all people, my God, I love that. Okay.
And I had Evan Bacone shirt dresses. That was my outfit, Evan Bacone, double-breasted and little fishnets. And I worked for an economist who a specialty was economic stocks. And he was quite eccentric, a true cowboy with a big hat. And I was his, first PA. And it was fun. I lasted a little while down there, but it was male dominated. I was exactly not what they wanted, but maybe brainy, but not necessarily did I fit in. And that was probably the first time I realized, wow, you also have to look at your surroundings. Are you like the others? Do you have common things outside of the office? Am I smoking those cigars, Laura? I'm not.
Right. and so did you feel like I've got to get out of here, or
I didn't want to fully leave because I was educated in that, and my parents, paid for my college. I had respect of the, their gift of the education, and I knew that finance was going to help me do whatever I went forward with. But I didn't know that there was such a career as selling advertising at a magazine, or, we did the kids issues, which were the holiday issues with Bon Point, and I had to cast children. And, I didn't know that was a job. Remember, I knew that we could labor in sewing clothes, but not necessarily, this is a job. I can look at kids and say, okay, you're in or you're not. So that was my job. And then I realized that this magazine didn't have an office in Paris.
So you got a job. You met a woman in Gramercy Park,
and I became her assistant. Yeah.
And where was she? She was
at Town and Country magazine.
Wow. And did you know Town and Country? I mean, was it something that you had read or been interested in?
It was in the women's boarding school, which was on Gramercy Park at the boarding. It had a sitting room, very old school, and there was magazines in there. And of course, Town and Country was. It was right near the Gramercy Arts Club, which I became a member early on. So, it was all kind of posh around there, though I wouldn't have known that. I mean, where the boarding school or boarding house is now some luxury condominium, and Jimmy Fallon's on the top floor.
And so what was it like working at a magazine versus Wall Street? Was it a totally different set of rules?
We were on the border because the children's issue was quite respected for the advertising. So we were bordering the advertising department and the fashion department. Mm-hmm. So we're still a little bit concerned about money, mm-hmm. which was something I learned through my career was still important. So, if our shoots were magnificent, you'd get everybody wanting to advertise. And if they weren't, that's when a reshoot would happen. But, the children's issue, believe it or not, was one of the most profitable.
And did you automatically connect to that, to the styling and I guess producing?
No, I was more interested in the business side of the magazines. And that's how I ended up convincing them that we should have an office in Paris and I should open it. And that was way back when there was no internet or nothing. So like you needed somebody to. And
how did you even? I mean, that was audacious. How did you even think that should be a possibility?
You kind of became friendly with the people. You became friendly in there. I did have one good friend, and she took me to Loehmann's. That was a really good friend back then. Yeah. And, my first outfits were Jean Galliano bought at Loehmann's. I will never forget that outfit because she knew when goods were dropped and we went way up in Harlem. We'd take a subway. We'd go together early Sunday mornings. That woman was magnificent. Now, I'm not sure where she was, but she bought Donna Karan. And that's where we got it, in the back room. But
wasn't that fun?
It was incredible.
The hunt
Laura.
was so incredible. Oh my God.
So incredible. And once you knew when and where they were getting it and you knew your designer was coming, it was like, I was hardcore then.
Me too. I mean, I went to school outside of Boston. And so Filene's was so much fun. The things that you would find, it was just like a dream.
It was a gold mine. And really, one of the designers I loved and ended up going to work for, his clothes were there, very hard to understand. Romeo Gilli's his name. And I knew how to do it all. And those ladies in that back room were like, show me how you did that,
Because back in the day, you had to wear something special to do that, right? You had to wear like basically a leotard underneath because you had to strip down in the store.
Well, and you learn, I'm sorry, what did I have on back then? I can't remember, Only Hearts maybe or something, but like, come on, the Kim Kardashian doing a unitard now is just like, those are essential to have at a come to guest on sale or wherever you're going. And I laugh about it because, these women were so modest, that would go in those back rooms. They had Jeffrey Bean, Laura, my favorite outfit of Jeffrey Bean. I got back there. I can't even believe it was back there.
But Ellen, so this sounds like the Ellen I know. So because I think you and I both just love beautiful things. And so was that sort of did that turn on for you then? My mom was always dressed and I always dressed dolls. I don't think I ever connected all of it until I got to Paris. I ended up helping Azzedine Alaya walk his dogs. He was a small man. How did that happen?
I really don't remember, Laura. I was trying to because I just remember he didn't speak English very well.
No, he didn't.
I just heard of him and I knocked on that intimidating door and we became friends. And this is a long time ago when no one even knew who he was. And I was there when this man came knocking with a ponytail and thought he was coolest guy ever. And he was going to open a store in New York and he wanted these clothes. And that man's name is Gene Pressman. And the store at that time was a men's discount store with a small alcove on the top floor of designer brands. But this young man had a vision to say, I'm going to conquer fashion in such a compelling and new way for Mr. Alaya that he said yes.
And did you believe him? I mean, could you see it?
He was from Syracuse and I had done that semester in Syracuse. That was the bond. I don't know. There was something innocently rock star about him with his tight jeans. And remember, I'm from Canada. We only wore tight jeans. It was like, this guy's my people. And he said, well, you can have a job at this new store. And I ended up taking a job at Barney's, which in those days we did everything. This is one of the miniature shopping bags that we created. It was a black shopping bag, and it is truly the logo. Love. No apostrophe. I corrected that 152,000 times, including under all the recent articles at Printemps where they spell the name wrong. But I was programmed by my lovely boss to do many things, Laura, at this job. She had come from Bergdorf's. She was the etiquette book of all kinds of people. You follow etiquette. And she taught me so much. And to this
and who
day,
was that, Ellen?
I'll call her a dear friend, is Mallory Andrews. And she had come to Barney's with two of her friends, Connie Darrow and Richard Lambertson. And they were the three people that kind of got hired to start this new store. Neil Kraft came in with advertising, and Mallory hired people, me, Simon Doonan, and Stephen Johankonek had been there. He was in store design. And James Mail, another dear friend of mine, came in for events and plants and flowers. And she really kind of put an interesting team together. We were all hard workers and all very young in our careers, but devoted to make Barney's special.
And what was your role?
I was the head of, initially we didn't really have staff. I was the head of PR, but, I eventually became the head of PR, but I was the head of everything related to that division.
And did you understand? I mean, you had no training in that, but did you understand what that meant and what it needed to be for Barney's for this new thing?
As we were downtown and we were considered alternative to Bergdorf's, there was no rules, Laura. We could make the rules. And back then you had no, filler people. You were the person. And, we created press days. Well, what were press days, Laura? We called in from the designers in Europe when the buyers were there. They would pick 3 outfits that we bought at Barney's, and we had them in a conference room that we created where Carrie Donovan would come with her staff. And then I would do a presentation to Carrie of, these are the designers that Barney's was supporting for the season. And these are the outfits you have to pull from to use in your magazines. And the same was with the home department in Barney's. We had a full store of housewares, of apothecary goods, of menswear. I learned every inch of that magnificent store. And I could tell you that Route de Tay was the fragrance exclusive to Barney's, that, Clarice Cliff was one of the most beautiful vintage potters in the world that we had in our vintage area. I mean, it was amazing. I can't even tell you what I learned. We had a tender buttons department and lilac chocolates. I mean, iconic things today.
Talk about working at Barney's in its heyday and kind of why it was so different and how I guess how you were all in on it, like how everybody understood, like this is the job.
And remember, it was just one store. Then it started to grow. I was there at the beginning. I even found some of the original invitations, which no one can even believe I still have, but I can because I collect everything. This was the famous Levi's denim, which we sent in tubes, exquisitely designed tubes of Levi jackets, asked specific designers and artists to customize them. And then we did a launch party where we auctioned off the jackets down the spiral staircase that was created by Andre Putman in that gorgeous store. And my favorite model was Madonna. She wore her friend's Jean-Michel Basquiat's jacket. And it went on and on. We had Iman. Look at that. Iman was wearing Alaya. Oh my God. No, actually that was Keith Haring. Keith Haring, can you imagine? And all these people were up on that top floor with me. I was responsible with my girlfriend and another young man to get them all dressed and get them down that spiral staircase. It wasn't a big team, Laura. That's what was so amazing. And what we accomplished with a small team was legendary.
Yeah.
There was a magazine I found too, which I'm going to give to Jean and Bob. There is a book that is done, Laura. It'll be out in September that Jean has had a writer do about Barney's. And I know there's galleys that people have seen, so it is finished. It is coming out, and I think it will be exciting for people to really know some of the things that I lived.
Yeah.
Because those times are gone. When I say the name of these places, they're gone.
Yeah. I mean, and it's so sad that nobody had, people haven't been able to experience that heyday. I mean, it was just the most exciting place to shop ever in the world.
It wasn't a competition between, these retailers. It was a different viewpoint that was a welcoming of artists and alternative people. I say that because uptown is very different. If you're not an uptown person, you didn't feel that comfortable shopping. We got the Andy Warhols. We got, the artists blowing glass like Dale Chihuly coming through Barney's. And they were again, I say it, Ruben Toledo and Isabel. I mean, they were people that lived around the corner, and we became their restaurant because we had a beautiful restaurant. Roger Thompson was a hair salon. Everyone was getting their hair done downstairs. It was full serviced in a way that nothing was like that downtown.
So why did you decide to leave?
That was my mistake. I will be honest. I got approached by Bergdorf Goodman, believe it or not, to become a fashion director under Don Mello. And I thought that was a good move. It was more money. I should have known I was not really like the others there. I mostly wore hot pants at that time and go-go boots. And those hot pants were Chanel and Moschino bought by Bergdorf's. But Mr. Niemark did not like that attire and called me every morning to his office to see what I was wearing. I just didn't fit in. I did call Jean and ask to come back, but they wouldn't let me. So I stuck it out until a man I loved and wrote love letters to. We were back in the day where mail was the mode, or a telex, but you couldn't telex. And that was really where I learned what life was about. And I moved to Italy. And I
worked for Romeo Gigli.
I did.
And tell me,
peak of his career.
And talk about him and why he was so special.
Well, there was 3 people, and I will say they were all special. I had a relationship with all 3. Carla Sizzani was his muse. Wow. She had been a magazine editor, and she came in-house to run the Immagine of Romeo Gigli with her own Carla Sizzani gallery within our compound. Donato Mino was her husband and the mastermind behind the growth of Romeo Gigli. I traveled often with him because I was more in his department, an exquisite human being. He had come from the salsa era of furniture and design. So that is how our stores got developed under Romeo Gigli with his mind. And then there was Romeo, the true artistry of color and femininity and Baroquism and Romanticism. I mean, Laura, I did fall in love with him. And I truly wrote a love letter when I worked at Barney's. We had his first show. And then at Bergdorf's, we had the magnificent major show. And the letters came back, and they eventually offered me a job. And that was when I was really naive. And then I learned all of these people that you will want to know. Mats Gustafsson. I mean, I have all the catalogs from the original days, and they're in mint condition. I just, we launched so many. Look at this. Look at these. This is our swimsuit catalog. I mean, can you see this? They were just works stunning. Of art. I mean, everything. And, that is the saddest thing, is that he's never really, I did have a moment of reconnecting with him through a wonderful journalist who went to see his new life. He lives in Marrakesh. He has a hotel. And during COVID, this man connected me to Romeo. I'd not spoken to him in years. And I'm so glad he's still here. He's created something wonderful to travel to if anybody wants to go on vacation in Marrakesh. But we had a special time, and that broke up, and it was a sad breakup, and I didn't know what to do.
Well, talk about that. Tell me, what about, like, why was it so challenging to work for these different people, and why didn't it work out? Not with you, but with him.
Yeah, in truth, it was a love story and a triangle that broke up, and you couldn't keep or sustain those parts separately. It one fuels the other, and the marriage was so, of those three parties was an explosion of magnificence. So you try just to have the designer go off, which he tried, and get the factories to support you. Okay. But you lose Carla Cizzani, whose sister is Franca Cizzani. I mean, they were powerful, and still she is to this day powerful. You can't fight them. Yeah. So, and then you lose a man who controlled all your licensees and your, finances. It's a marriage, and it's a team. People forget that you need a team. And that is something you see today with the troubles that are happening in this world and in fashion. You have to support your people and be, what's the word? Grateful to them. I mean, that's it. You learned it big time. That if you go back, and I don't believe the books have ever been written clearly on that breakup, but it's a sad one because historically I'd say Helmut Lang, they were all made in the Zama Sport factory. You had Xenia making Romeo suits. Xenia is so prestigious today. Imagine them making a colorful, creative men's suit, Laura, at the time they were doing it. I mean, to get them to do that is remarkable because it elevated his stature immediately. And to this day, Xenia is still considered the top of the top. So he had the top. And we had the most wonderful men coming in the store on Madison. We opened, this was the other debacle. I think we're going to open downtown. Holly Solomon is our number one client in a major gallerist back then, my size. And she took us to the meat packing, stood out there in her little petal blouse and cocoon coat of Romeo, and said, I'll put my gallery here. We'll have Jerry's restaurant here. Your store will be here. And, it was meat and people chopping up meat back then. And it was like, I remember Donato looking at me like, no, we got to make some money. And then we're going uptown. And I'm like, no, I want to go here, And the progress of the meat packing. I mean, Laura, come on, that was insane.
Yeah, Florent.
And Holly saw it. Holly Solomon saw it. She was a wonderful gallerist of eccentricity, but she lived in Sutton Place. So, in all honesty, come on, what does that teach you?
What's the biggest lesson you learned from that experience?
There's so many. If I talk about it, we'll be. You don't be so naive. I never did a proper company with the Italians. It was under my name. So when it all imploded, that lease was under Ellen Carey in the store, and it was lot of rent that I had to come up with. Wow. But the banks did believe that I had some smarts. No, I didn't. Remember, it goes back to my banking.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's how I secured some funding to open my own company, which is called Seed.
So when you started Seed, what was the opportunity that you saw? Because I don't really remember there being showrooms back then.
Right. Well, that was the thing. I think I didn't want to go back and work for somebody full time after being, through your heartbroken through these experiences. Yeah. So I felt that maybe creating a space that was inviting and showing different things would be exciting. I had, fortunately, through Romeo, met a lot of the magnificent specialty stores
Mm-hmm.
and befriended a few of them when I was working with Romeo, like buying for them in the flea markets in London. Or one was Joan Weinstein. She owned Ultimo, and she was perhaps one
Incredible.
of the most incredible women in, I can say. And she would wire me 50,000, and I would go to London on my weekends, and I would buy at the auctions, particularly 1920s and 30s dresses, and she would sell them in her shop.
And that store was so beautiful, wasn't it?
And the coral, that's my love of coral. When I moved from my loft in Soho and I ended up going to a private house, I had a coral room because of her.
Yeah.
But she would travel, and I go back to Carla Cizzani. I traveled with these people, and it was a different time, Laura. When I see people saying, I don't check anything, I can't carry on. I was like, boy, just like, would I have loved to work for you? I was the one staying at the airports in LA. I'll never forget this. And Carla had about 42 luggages. Each one had a coach. We were having a meeting at Maxfield's or something, and it was like, okay. And I stayed, and they stayed at the Bel Air, and I stayed at the Mondrian, but I knew how to get all that luggage to their hotels, And one of the things she'd carry, I mean, it was insane, was like a spice, those Gina DeLuca spice racks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was in one luggage. Hello. What?
It was a different time. That was not a carry-on. You mentioned Seed House. Will you talk a little bit describe your incredible townhouse in Chelsea?
Well, so Soho, like we know the city does, it changes and it became expensive. I think I had a 10-year lease at the beginning. And I was saying to somebody who recently looked at a space on Green Street, I had walled my long loft I took and sublet my left side to an art director. So he paid my rent, thank you, when I was so young. That was Sam Shahid, and he was a very big agency and did many books. And Bruce Weber was his photographer, and they would have thousands of edits and print pictures, Laura, all Saturday, Sunday, they'd be in there editing. It was all hand done. It was so different. And it was a great neighbor. We had the best time, very fun time in Soho. And
what was your biggest personal or professional challenge during this time?
I always had trouble getting people to come, and particularly the department stores. I was just going back to my Bergdorf days. I just wasn't like the others. And Megan Park flew once. We did Neiman Marcus Conclave. I mean, the word conclave is out in everybody's tongue. But, Megan and I remember and Megan is a very fun. So Megan is an Australian, but she started in London. I met her through Lulu Guinness. She then got pregnant. Sorry, Megan, for confessing your story with twins. And she was later in life, in her late 30s. And so she went on bed rest, but she ends up going home to Australia. And it researched her career, saying hometown girl comes home. I end up in India for her. Her career started in India doing embroidery work, mostly in bridal. Then she moved into ready-to-wear, and she meets Dries Van Noten.
Yeah. And
the factory to this day, the one she works with two, still make Dries clothes and hers. She's very knowledgeable in embroidery work, though that might fall out of favor now and then. I'm encouraging her to come back with more embroidery because that is something she does better than anyone.
Well,
and that, I think a lot of my time related to my spaces. My company Seed is always the master umbrella, but then I had, the Seed house, and then Seed Penthouse, and Seed Garden, Seed Hudson for a while. I was up in the Hudson Valley for COVID. But you just don't realize that name kind of could be under everything. But it's
a great brand. That was pretty genius.
Yes. Remember I had my anniversary of 30, was it 30 years or 25, Seed 25. It was my mom's idea to call up your favorite people from the past, ask them to create one item that you can wholesale to make it under seed 25. And that was somebody that, Laura, you also supported. I'm going to bring his name up because we had the most fun traveling with him.
Oh, he's wonderful.
He looked like Lyle Lovett and rode a unicycle. And I will tell you, he really did.
But he was incredible, Ellen, because he owned all of Charles James's corset machines, right?
And I mean, we made some very famous dresses, like this one ended up on Jennifer Hudson. And
my sister's wedding dress is that.
Was it really? Oh, yeah. God. I remember we made but look at these though, Laura. I mean, I still have these corsets. I can't say I could get in them, but but he was discovered by Joan Weinstein. He's self-taught. He makes gingerbread houses like nobody else because he became pattern obsessed. And that's how he went into corsetry. And back in my youth at Barney's, on my bulletin board was a double-page spread of the Vanity Fair corset ad of Ultimo. And believe it or not, years later, I meet the man through Joan's suggestion and help him. And we lasted almost 20 years. And we really did have a fun time trial. I can't say it was fun. He and I were tiny people. He was eccentric. I was eccentric. And we would go to Dallas and we'd look at this plate of the food. And it was like, can we share that? That was like... But I think we came to your world. It was so beautiful. By George was pretty fun too. Katie and Matt really showed us a fun time.
So wonderful.
Peter did, he handmade everything. It was just a remarkable human being of magnificence. And, I don't think people understand hand labor is going to still be in business despite the factories, the hardships, and he'll come out of the woods on a big commission.
Well, tell me, Ellen, what are you most excited about in your work now?
You know what? Right now, I'm not excited as I should be, but I do have to say I came back to New York. I left unexpectedly. It's a long story, but for 3 months again, and I came home because I'd made a mistake. And I have to admit that, sometimes you do something and you have to say, okay, it was wrong. And unexpectedly, the passing of my mother brought me back to where I need to be.
Yeah.
And as you know, I like to do pins. The Joy was a huge success, but the new one is an ode to my mom. It's tiny but mighty. It's her favorite colors were Edna Mode's favorite colors. You'll remember my doll, Edna Mode, who was in the Incredibles movie.
Yep.
And my mom reminds me of her. She was always telling you things, and prophets like black is beautiful. So in this moment, I begged to come back to my penthouse in the financial because it's safety and I know I can rest here. And this magnificent deco building that I have admired all my life in New York, across from Trinity Church, is finally finished, Laura. It's been 8 years in the conversion from office to residential, and a department store has come called Printemps. And that opened a month and a half ago. And I will tell you, that has brought me tremendous joy.
I love that.
I go there about 22 times. I
love it, Ellen.
All the kids know me there. I have gifted them some of my personal clothes because I know that I won't wear them again. And I pulled them back from my dealers and said, you've inspired me. I got a private tour of the store before it opened with a wonderful designer, Peter Stropolopoulos. You might remember he used to do John Care. Now he does pottery, couture pottery. We've become friends later now and our different levels of life. And I've never had such a magnificent day as with him for 5 hours in this magnificent building. And, there's a mosaic finale room that hasn't been uncovered to the public. It was built in 1930. It is truly sensational, Laura. And they've honored it, doing a living shoe salon within this. if anybody says anything negative about it, okay, there is missteps, but they can be corrected. The core is phenomenal.
I can't
And
wait.
I am excited to say that to you because I can't say I've,
you haven't been able to say it for many, many years, I can tell you.
Well, I do love my, there's little specialty stores, but this is something that we need right now.
Yeah.
Especially in New York.
You said that your motto right now is don't let the old in. What does that mean to you?
I think as we age, and I am old now for this career, but not that old. But
you look great. I don't think you are.
Thank you, Laura. But you, if you see under the mirror, I see. You do feel ageism a little, and I've had this discussion with people, and you won't get hired because you're this age or you don't have 100,000 followers on your Instagram, and I mean, at one point, Laura, I'm just. Just give me some joy. Okay. I'm still here. I still have knowledge. I can, help anybody. And that's, I had a call with somebody recently and they said that to me. You don't sound like you let the old in. And that was something that Holly Solomon, as she aged, she never seemed old to me. Yeah. She was an eccentric woman. Her apartment was beyond crazy on Sutton Place, no less, but bonkers inside. And her galleries were so forward and progressive, though she was 80, so let's say that, let's celebrate age. Why are we not? Now, there's more interest today than there used to be, but, I'd say it's wrong.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you've changed one bit. I mean, it's
Laura,
like
you've seen me through the highs and lows, and I do say I thank you because, your world is so beautiful, but, it's like in New York, sometimes not, so
yeah, New York
you have to find, that was something coming back this time was different from any before. I missed my things, and my things are not like the others. And I'm not going to encourage people to learn my things because they're my things. I have a secret alley. I go and, I have my churches. I love churches, and they are many in this city that you can go and rest your nerves and sit there for, 10 minutes and center yourself and get back out. But it doesn't mean there's anybody in them. It's just your special place, secret gardens, or, your love of, Morgan Library or someplace that isn't the trend. And I always thought that was a good thing until it wasn't. Like, and I learned I don't care.
If you could share any advice that with our listeners about what it takes to make it in the fashion industry, what would it be?
There's so many ways now to do it direct to consumer and enjoy yourself and slow fashion. We started these joy dresses, Laura, during COVID, and I rented some crazy house up in Hudson Valley, and I met a man, and we started making scarf dresses with vintage scarves because they were accessible, and I had a huge collection. He had a huge collection, and they were designers. Did you know Giorgio St. Angelo made scarves? Did you know Jeffrey Mead made scarves? Did you know, Kenzo and Adrian Bettadini? But you could find designer silk scarves, and the dresses take 10, and they're each unique. And the first person that bought one was Molly Nutter. She wore it to By George, and she said, "Ellen, you have to make them for our store." And I'm like, no, these are fun. These are supposed to be fun. But it turned into something bigger as they opened St. Vincent Hotel in New Orleans. But I'm saying, be open. You don't need to follow the rules if you want to be something, unique and special. If you want to be a big conglomerate in the department stores, okay, that's a different journey you have to take. But I feel there's so many, and you've supported them over your years, the artisanal. Look at Dosa. I mean, that's a brand that still makes my heart skip a beat. And she does it on her own terms in her own way.
Yeah.
And the color sense is there. And it's just, it's what I'm saying. I think it's time to celebrate being unique and and do it in your way. You don't have to follow what you think is the norm. And I mean, especially now, as you know.
So there's a question we ask everybody on the podcast, and it is, what did you wear to prom?
Oh, God. Well, in all honesty, that's an interesting question. I didn't go to my prom. I made my prom.
Tell me about that.
I have a picture that somebody sent me recently, because I didn't get the picture box from my mom's. I got some things, but I found a card, oddly enough, in my box. And in that card it was my 40th birthday. There was pictures she had sent me from some of my favorites, aunts, like we were talking about. And in there was one with me and like the minions that were with me that made the prom. Of course, my mom was at the prom. I can tell you what she wore, because she was a chaperone. And I was like, my mom was the chaperone at my prom, and I don't go to the prom. But I made the prom. So I was an artist, I should have been an art teacher, if you want the truth. I often filled in for mine because he was smoking weed somewhere. And I became very good at art and, painted the school mascot on the gym wall. I was hired to do these things. I was already getting commissions with my briefcase at age, 12 and 13. But the prom was it was controversial for me, because I didn't, it was very, I wanted the teacher scholarship more, Laura, which I got, that was more important to me.
I love it.
So I wore, it was a corduroy, jacket, and brown and white herrington pants. But it was a big, I recently spoke to some of these, because they will be attending my mom's memorial, since they all knew her. They knew her more than I did, I think. But yeah, so I was working it all through the night. Oh my God. Things don't, as you know, when you do events, always stay up.
Well, Ellen, thank you.
It's been a pleasure, Laura.
Well, thank you for making us more interesting, and for sharing all of these incredible people with us, because you made us look good with your wonderful, spectacular taste. So thank you.
It's been fun. I do feel like I'm a turtle now, no longer Tasmanian devil, as people would describe me back in the day.